whether it's a physical ailment or a mental, spiritual issue, if you're feeling stuck and you don't know where to turn to, the breath work, the breathing is a great way to start getting into it.
Most of us were taught just pop a pill, tough it out, or treat our bodies like they're just machines. But there is a different way. And you just heard a little something from my co-host for this season, Dr. Tyler McCurry. So hey, welcome to the How People Grow podcast season 3. I'm David Achata and I'm your host. As an author and someone who works with leaders, I've seen firsthand how disconnected we can get from our physical selves. And this is why this season is so important to me. It's all about the wisdom of the body. We're not just talking about mindset here. We're going way deeper, tapping into this ancient intelligence you've got within you. So forget that whole mind-body split. Dr. McCurry and I are going to walk you through how it's all connected. We're going to talk about our body's natural abilities to heal and share some really eye-opening stuff about trauma and how it affects us. So get ready for some real talk between Dr. McCurry and me, plus some of my own stories that'll help you understand what your body's been trying to tell you. So if you're ready to tune into that inner wisdom, I'm glad you're here. So join Dr. McCurry and I for this season, The Wisdom of the Body. It's time to go inward. Well, listeners, welcome back for part 2 of, we're in, season 3, and I am working through a series of conversations with Dr. Tyler McCurry. And if you haven't been able to hear the last episode, our last conversation was understanding the signals that our body is sending us. This one is about trauma that we carry, stress, and healing. So in other words, what does our body know? And the reason I wanted to create this season of talks on this subject, I just see people carrying around all these things in my coaching, in the corporate world, and I thought, who better to talk to than Dr. Tyler McCurry? So before we jump in, Tyler, about today's topic about what the body knows, I want to have a little fun with you. All right?
Okay.
You didn't know I was going to do this. So let's play a game, all right? The game is, what does Tyler know?
Uh-oh.
And this is going to be stuff not related to your work, okay?
Okay.
So fun facts about Tyler that most people wouldn't know that he knows. All right. So let's start at the top with books. What do you really know a lot about when it comes to books?
Oh man, first one would be Star Wars. I'm a Star Wars nut. I've watched everything in any kind of video format that's Star Wars, and I've also read almost every book that's been published Star Wars. Um,
Whoa.
yeah, not as much on the graphic novels. I wish I was a little better on those because some of those are fantastic. Um, but yeah, I'm a huge Star Wars nut, and I will talk to you for hours about Star Wars. Um,
Okay. Okay. So since we're talking about the body, all right,
yeah.
what does the Force what does the Force know?
Oh man. I mean, we could have like a whole season on just this. Um, if you think of the Force in Star Wars, that's kind of like, the spiritual realm or the Holy Spirit, and those kinds of things. Um, I like to think of us as more of a sieve where, the the Force or the Holy Spirit, whatever, is flowing through us and is using us to work in more of an earthly realm,
Uh-huh.
or more of the physical realm. And so some of us are more in tune with that. So it's the same thing like with Jedi or Sith or whatever. They're more in tune with the feelings of the Force. And
Uh-huh.
by being
Uh-huh.
more in tune with that, they're able to do all these, amazing things that
Hmm.
most people can't do, because they haven't closed themselves off to that kind of
Hmm.
spiritual existence
Huh.
that connects us all together.
Okay, okay. I'm into this. So, what about the dark side? The dark side knows something too, and it's behaving a particular way. So, what do you think it knows?
Right. And the thing is, like when you look at, oh man, you're going down a rabbit hole you're probably going to regret.
I'm in, man. Let's go. I dove in head first with you.
Yeah. Um, when you read some of what they're writing about with the dark side users, um, a lot of them are very spiritual as well. They believe in the force. They recognize it for what it is. They just have a different idea of what it's about and what it should be. I think the main difference is you have one side that thinks everything should be good, and you have another side that thinks everything should be for selfish gain, and it's all about me, me, me.
Hmm.
In reality, I feel like there's somewhere in the middle that you need to realize, not everyone is inherently bad and not everyone is inherently good. We're all light and dark, and we have to find that balance between in order to be healthy.
Hmm.
That's why the Jedi ultimately failed, was because they were so focused on being good and doing fulfilling their role that they completely overlooked this dark side that was growing, and it led to their downfall. But then it was the same thing as the darkness started to grow, the little bits of light that started to pop up, they were overlooking it. And then that light, the resistance, took over.
I love this, man. We need to watch some movies and make. I just want to have your commentary on it along with this is awesome. Okay, okay. So one more. So this is what does Tyler know? Question number two.
Yeah.
Um, you've got a long weekend in front of you,
Hmm.
and you're gonna queue up the ideal scenario for just you personally. Nobody else
Okay.
counts. What are you gonna do?
Okay. I already know.
What?
I'm watching everything Lord of the Rings in order. Uh, and I'm going like full bore, like I'm going all the extended releases. Uh, I'm starting with Rings of Power on Amazon, rewatching those two seasons, and then I'm doing The Hobbit, all three movies, extended releases, and then Lord of the Rings, all three movies, extended releases.
Wow, man. I love it. Okay, okay. One more, all right?
Okay.
What does Tyler know? Question three. What is your ideal party scenario?
All right, listeners, he's asking me this because he knows the answer.
What is it?
The ideal party scenario is there is no party. Oh, there's no party. I'm left alone. You say, send me a text and say happy birthday, and then that's it. I'm done. So,
Not ironic. Today's episode is on trauma. So if we were to throw Dr. Tyler McCurry a big party, it would traumatize him. He would
absolutely,
walk
yeah.
out the door.
Yeah, if I tell all my family, I'm like, if you throw me a party, especially like a surprise party, if I walk in and I see that that's what it is, I am going to turn around and walk out. So,
Well, this is a fun way for us to jump into the subject because the subject today is about what your body knows. So I know you enough, Tyler, to know you're introverted, you enjoy the quiet time if you can get it.
yeah,
Um, just like you know me well enough to know if I could go walk around the mountains for 3 days with one, two, or three people, I'd out and talk nonstop, I would do it. Or I would
yeah.
throw a party for 60 people. I've done it before. Um, I'm coming up on my 50th birthday here in a short couple of years, man. You're invited to be with my 50 friends. Doesn't that sound fun?
I see. I thought you were going to go with like 100 friends.
I mean, I could. But it's funny, because what our body knows is connected to our personality, no doubt.
Yeah,
But what our body knows is also connected to our story. And so as we jump into this conversation today, I want to allude to a resource for our listeners if you haven't read it. It's a book by Dr. Bessel van der Kolk called The Body Keeps the Score. My wife Amy and I read this book years ago, and it was really the beginning of us coming aware to our bodies and paying attention to the signals our bodies are sending. And so, Tyler, the question I want to kind of kick us off today with is about how trauma and chronic stress becomes stored in the body and
Yeah.
how this affects our physical and emotional well-being.
Yeah, that's kind of a heavy topic there.
Hmm.
Because I honestly I've made the comment before that sometimes I feel like I should have gone into psychiatry because, at least 80% of what I deal with has some form of mental health component to it.
Hmm.
Um, so a lot of what we see um, can go back to, untreated stress, um, lack of um, the feelings of connectivity, lack of community, lack of purpose, those kinds of things. Um, and so what I see is people coming in with unexplained symptoms, kind of like what we talked about last episode, whether it be headaches that they've tried everything for, literally everything, all the medications, all the over the counter stuff, every kind of healing modality, whatever. They've tried all those things. It can be issues with the gut. I can see, find hormonal issues in people, um, high blood pressure, any of that stuff can be related to trauma that has been unaddressed in the body. Um, we tend to focus more on I have a lot of tension in my neck and back and I'm trying to get rid of it, you
Hmm.
know, and then, you try to work on it or you find a body worker like me to work on it. And, we'll kill our hands and wrists trying to get you to relax. And it doesn't really work that well. Um, or it does to a point. And so that's one thing I always tell people is I know we're making progress if every time I work on you, you're getting better and better and better. And the ultimate goal is for you to get to where you don't need me anymore because we've taken care of all the underlying issues. If you keep having the same issue and you're keeping having to come in every week or two, we know there's an underlying issue. And a lot of times it's unaddressed trauma.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I identify with this one so much because I've had a lot of unaddressed trauma that I've carried around, and you've worked on me for years, so you know kind of where all my aches and pains are at. Um, and maybe I could just share a little bit about how that's worked, and then we'll kind of see where things go. Um, I mentioned in our last episode somebody had a gut issue. Guess who
Yeah.
that person was? Me. um, yeah, I mean, I don't think this is too much information because I know there's plenty of people who have the exact same issue. And,
Yeah.
I grew up in a home where there was a lot of arguing and fighting. There's a lot of secrecy going on. And that sent me into the world with this high tolerance for ambiguity and tension.
Mm.
And so people would say, "Man, David, you are really good at like helping people navigate conflict. You're really good in the face of unpredictability." And we have these fight, flight, or freeze responses. I've come to understand that I was a freezer,
Mm.
and I would just wait for something to pass. What looked like calm was really just me freezing. But leading up to those, I often would have gut issues. Um, I don't have this issue anymore, but for years, if there was somebody who was like really upset in a way that didn't really seem to match the situation, my body would just turn on my gut. And
Yeah.
and oftentimes I would have to run and use the bathroom. And I would just empty myself out because I was just so taking on what was going on. So there's a concept here I want to unpack with you. This is called nervous system dysregulation. And many of us have the same issue, and it may not be a stomach or a bowel issue. It might be headaches. It might be an ache or pain in certain parts of your body. But can you tell us what is a nervous system dysregulation?
Yeah. So when you look at the nervous system, you have what they call the autonomic nervous system, and that's broken up into your sympathetic nervous system, which is your fight or flight. I'm going to fight the bear. I'm going to run away.
Hmm.
Uh, and then you have your parasympathetic nervous system, which is your rest and relax. And so the body works best when those are balanced. So when you have a stressful situation, your sympathetic will start to take over. But then when you're out of that situation, your parasympathetic will start to take over. And so you kind of keep that balanced point. What happens with nervous system dysregulation is one or the other takes over and stays in the higher state
Hmm.
most of the time.
Hmm.
Usually in our world, this is going to be people stay in more of a sympathetic state. So this is why people who tell me like I can go to sleep at night, but a couple hours into it or at the same time at 3 o'clock every morning, I'm waking up startled and I don't know why.
Hmm.
When they're telling me that, that means, when you're trying to sleep, your parasympathetic should be taking over and should be more active. Well, what's happening is their sympathetic is in such overdrive that even though they had just enough parasympathetic to actually fall asleep, within a couple of hours, that sympathetic has popped back up and has taken over. And now they're having this like startle awake response.
Hmm. Hmm.
And usually that has to deal with trauma that they
Yeah.
haven't dealt with.
Okay, so right there, this is so important. Sympathetic and parasympathetic, the way that I like to understand parasympathetic, and correct me if I'm getting the terminology wrong, but for me, this is the deeper healing, rest and
Mhm.
digest state we want to be in.
Yes. Right.
And how would you contrast sympathetic? So parasympathetic is resting and digesting.
Uh-huh.
How would you characterize sympathetic?
So if your parasympathetic is rest and digest, think of your sympathetic as your run and dump.
Okay, okay, all right. Good, good, good. So here's what's
Yeah.
interesting. We talked about this in our last episode briefly. We touched on the spiritual component.
Yeah.
What I have seen, because I work in the corporate world and actually have a number of years of pastoral experience, is people getting up in the middle of the night. They can't sleep because they're
Yeah.
worried, something's on their mind. And for people from a Christian background in particular, oftentimes they say something like, the Holy Spirit woke me up.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that's what it is, or maybe you're just really worried about something. What I
Yeah.
hear in the corporate world is I hear people saying, yeah, man, I just had a lot of work to do. I thought I'd just get up and knock it out.
Yeah.
So, what is happening in the nervous system when people are waking up in the middle of the night or waking up early and it's causing them to attribute meaning to it and they just
Yeah.
get up and start knocking out some things? What's going on with them?
Yeah. So, a lot of times there's something underlying that's waking them up. It could be something as simple as they needed to pee, and they
Hmm.
were they were just awake enough that the bladder is, hollering at them saying, "Hey, you need to empty me out." Um, to something as severe as they've had such bad trauma that their body is used to in the middle of the night. Um, Growing up, it got used to, a violent parent, or arguing parents, or something, abuse or whatever it is, that it knows, okay, around this time every morning I need to wake up because I need to be ready to fight.
Hmm. 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 Wow.
Yeah. And so that will kick over because their body has been trained to do that. So at that time, their that sympathetic nervous system will start raising again because that's what their body is used to. Um, and so in the case of like the corporate world, where they say, "Oh, I knew I had work to get done, so I figured I'd go ahead and get up." Well, it's probably their body saying, "Hey, you've got a whole lot of work to do. We need to get this done."
Hmm.
And so it's like trying to ramp you up so you can go and get all that work done. Um,
Hmm.
from a Christian perspective, talking about, this is the Holy Spirit talking to me. No, there may be something to that. Sometimes I think the physical stuff is um, the Holy Spirit sending you signals before it's actually put it into words.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think a lot of times we, as Christians, will go straight towards this is the Holy Spirit and not, um, hey, this is that trauma that you've not dealt with since you were 4 years old.
Yeah.
Because it's easier to say, oh, it was the Holy Spirit than it is to actually say, well, I used to wake up to my parents arguing every night, and that's why I can't sleep well.
Yeah, so let's touch on this idea of regulation, nervous
Mhm.
system regulation and dysregulation. Um, so we're kind of touching on nervous system dysregulation, but let's back up a little bit and talk about what does it look like to move through the world as a person who has a nervous system that is regulated.
Yeah. So, a couple hours before you wake up, your nervous system is your sympathetic nervous system is going to start kind of spiking. And this is to do things like start mobilizing blood sugar, start increasing your heart rate, those kinds of things to get you up and moving and ready for the day. And so as you wake up, you kind of have that sympathetic nervous system that is kicking you in gear to say, okay, time to wake up, time to get moving. So, you'll go through the day, you'll do different things. Um, as you maybe get up and you eat, you're going to go into that rest and digest. And so your parasympathetic nervous system is going to kind of take over there to help you digest that food that you just ate.
Hmm.
Well, then as you're working through the day and maybe you have a difficult client or you're just really stressed out, you've got a lot to do, your sympathetic's going to take over. So that way you have, the norepinephrine and things like that in your system to keep you going and to get those things done. Well, then as you get home in the afternoons and maybe you eat or you're vegging out and watching some TV, that parasympathetic is going to start taking over. And then the closer to bedtime you get, the parasympathetic is going to flip you over into, okay, time to go to sleep.
Wow.
And so your parasympathetic is going to keep
Hmm.
you at that baseline while you're asleep so your body can repair itself and fix any issues that were underlying and balance your hormones, balance your blood sugar, those kinds of things, lower your heart rate. Um, and then you're going to go through that cycle again of about 2 hours before you wake up. That sympathetic is going to start to spike again.
So interesting. So on the contrast, what does it look like to move through the day with a dysregulated nervous system?
So a dysregulated nervous system may be you're waking up several hours early because your sympathetic nervous system is spiking earlier than it should. And so you wake up several hours early and you can't go back to sleep. So now you're in the sympathetic state, but because you've lost sleep, you're in even more of a sympathetic state because your body is just trying to keep you going for the
Yeah,
day.
right.
So you're even more imbalanced because it knows as soon as I start going into a parasympathetic, there I'm going to fall asleep. And so you're like, I've got to work, I got to do this, I got to do that. So your body will raise stress hormones, more norepinephrine, more cortisol, less things like serotonin, um, um, and things like that. And so you're going to be more in that sympathetic state throughout the day.
Hmm.
And it's going to be harder for you to do things that require sympathetic or parasympathetic, like actually resting and relaxing, eating food and digesting, those kinds of things, having a normal bowel movement. It's going to
Hmm.
be more difficult for you to do that because you're going to be in such that sympathetic state all day that you can't get into that sympathetic
Yeah,
or parasympathetic. Sorry.
yeah, I've lived like that. You probably have at times. So many people have lived where we're distressed and we're moving at a
Yeah.
pace that's not healthy, so we don't have time to eat right, use the bathroom right, exercise, breathe properly. Um, so for those of us listening who are listening and they're saying, "Oh, that's me. Oh, I live like that. I wake up way too many hours early. I'm worried about things. I know I'm not resting well." And if they don't know they're not resting well, what they do know is I feel sort of like amped up
Yeah.
unnecessarily. I don't like it. Um, how can we heal from that and Like, what are some body-based approaches to healing this way of life if we are tired of it and don't want to live that way anymore?
Yeah. So, I mean, the key to getting out of the sympathetic state is to get yourself into more of a parasympathetic state. And so, ways to do that, one is sleep. Try to get more sleep. Um, our bodies can't catch up on sleep. So, if you've lost a whole lot, it's not like you're going to recoup it, but you can make sure that your machine is running optimally by getting the amount of sleep that you need. So, that would be the first thing. And that may mean as you're trying to heal, you may need more naps throughout the day just to get yourself back accommodated to getting the appropriate amount of sleep throughout the day
Hmm.
or for that 24-hour period. The other thing I would do is make sure that you're eating healthier foods that are easier for the body, or not necessarily easier for the body to digest, but are more optimal for the body to digest. These are things like vegetables, fruits, healthy fats, nuts, legumes, lean meats, those kinds of things. If you're eating a lot of processed foods, they have a lot of unhealthy fats that are harder on the gut to digest, which is going to make you into more of a sympathetic state. If you're eating the processed foods that have a lot of sugar in it, that's going to be harder for the body to digest, which is going to raise a sympathetic state. But then it's also going to do things like dump that extra sugar as fat around the organs because it doesn't
Oh,
know how to process it. It
uh-huh.
can't do anything with it. And so the body says, well, this is a good fuel source that we may need later. And she's always tired anyway. So how about we hold on to every bit of fuel that we can possibly get?
Hmm.
And so it starts to dump it around the organs, like your pancreas, which can lead to diabetes, or your liver, which can lead to what they call NASH, non alcoholic steatohepatitis, which
Hmm.
is fatty liver disease.
Hmm.
Those fat deposits in the organs cause the organs to shut down. And so the fatty liver disease can lead to cirrhosis of the liver. And that's actually a big thing that we see nowadays is a huge rise in the number of people with fatty liver disease. But also,
Wow.
type 2 diabetes, with
Yeah.
the pancreas shutting down, that's another thing. That's another big part of it.
What do you think that says about how we're living right now as a culture, that we're seeing those two issues pop up more and more?
I think it's, you could talk about corporate greed and you could talk about all those different things and, people taking advantage of you and all that stuff. I think what it speaks more to is the fast pace of our society.
Hmm.
We're all running around, and when you see that red Chick-fil-A symbol, and I could just pop in and get some chicken, get some of the Lord's chicken, I'm going to be all set.
It's really healthy
Um,
too, right?
oh, you would think so, but no, no, it's not. Um, so that's the thing is,
The
we're all
Lord's
rushing around.
chicken.
But you just got that.
I'm hearing Nacho Libre, like in that scene in the movie where they're getting like chips, and this guy goes, he's like, yeah, they stole the chips, and this guy goes, did they not know they were the Lord's chips? I'm hearing the Lord's chicken. Sorry, I derailed you, man. I just got your joke. It's hilarious. So yeah. So what it says about society, we're rushing around a lot, and
Yeah, we're rushing around a lot, so our food sources are not clean. They're not good food sources because it takes longer to prepare those other foods, and healthier foods go bad quicker. So, we put a lot of preservatives in food just so it doesn't go bad, so we can store up a whole bunch so we don't have to keep going back to the store every day.
hmm.
Um, so that rushing around, I think, is a big part of how we got to where we are. But, aside from the diet, that leads to more levels of anxiety, more levels of stress, more levels of cortisol, which is going to make you hold on to uh, body fat and abdominal fat and things like that more readily. And so, and then with that extra fat in our bodies, that also dysregulates our hormones. So, with those things, we're really shooting ourselves in the foot. by simply just going too fast. And if we could learn to slow down a little bit, that would help.
Yeah, man, thanks for going through that. I think that's going to be really helpful for people who are listening. We didn't touch on it last time, but I was thinking about in our last conversation, it applies here. Someone asked a philosophy professor named Dallas Willard, like, what's the biggest enemy to spirituality, spiritual growth?
Yeah.
And he said it's hurry.
Yeah.
And he said we've got to learn to ruthlessly eliminate hurry. And our souls just weren't meant to move at that pace and hold this much information.